Good afternoon. It's time for the news at 4 p.m. on the Street 919 FM, courtesy T and Tech, the power to make it work. In the headlines, the TTPS rubbishes social media reports that Police Commissioner Gary Griffith has resigned. The MSJ calls on government to continue the school feeding program, and in news overseas, Hurricane Sally threatens U.S. southern states. And now the details. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is this afternoon refuting claims that Police Commissioner Gary Griffith has resigned his position earlier this afternoon. The post has been making its rounds on social media as Mr. Griffith's resignation letter. Only recently, Mr. Griffith had been engaged in a spat with Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley over the police's recent non-action at a pool party at Bayside Towers in Kukurit. Both Mr. Griffith and Dr. Rowley met at the Diplomatic Center in St. Anne's on Monday to discuss the issue. The Movement for Social Justice is calling on the government to continue the school feeding program. The MSJ made the call following a media report on Monday where the public was informed that the government is considering the use of food cards to replace the school feeding program. In a release to the media this afternoon, the MSJ stated that the entire value chain from the farmers who produce the food that goes into the meals to the small businesses contracted to the catering and the workers employed in its preparation have been adversely affected by the shutdown of the program since March. The MSJ also believes that the issue of food cards does not guarantee that the nutritional needs for the children will be met. In other news, the central bank earlier today reported that over 300 people in Trinidad and Tobago lost their jobs in the first half of 2020 due to the COVID-19 stay-at-home orders. In its July economic bulletin, the bank said 365 people were retrenched in 6 months, according to notices filed at the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development. The lockdown measures to mitigate the spread of the virus saw adjustments in the labor market, such as furloughed employment, layoffs, pay cuts, and reductions in work hours. Noting that official labor data from the Central Statistical Office are only updated to the third quarter of 2018, the ministry's information showed that the manufacturing sector accounted for 64% of all retrenchments. A Venezuelan woman on Tuesday reported that her 9-month-old baby was abducted in Chaguanas by an unidentified woman. Valentina Hernandez described the woman who took her daughter, Sofia Rivas, as a thin woman of East Indian descent. Ms. Hernandez said the woman came to the place where she lives and they spoke for a while. The woman told her she wanted to take the child to the supermarket to buy a juice for her, which was located downstairs from her apartment. CCTV cameras at the supermarket recorded the woman walking the aisles with baby Sophia in her arms before leaving with the child in a vehicle which was parked nearby and driven off by a man. The desperate mother is begging anyone who have seen her baby or knows her whereabouts to call the nearest police station. Finally, in news overseas, Hurricane Sally is slowly closing in on the U.S. Gulf states, threatening the U.S. southern states of Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. Hurricane Sally moved over the Gulf Coast earlier today, crawling onward at 3 kilometers per hour after becoming a Category 2 storm on Monday. Sally currently is moving with 135-kilometer winds and is expected to bring up to 61 centimeters of rain. It is expected to intensify before making landfall early on Wednesday. And that was a look at your 4 p.m. news on the Street 919 FM, courtesy TM Tech, the power to make it work. Recapping the headlines. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service rubbishes social media reports that Police Commissioner Gary Griffith has resigned. The MSJ calls on the government to continue the school feeding program. And in news overseas, Hurricane Sally threatens U.S. southern states. Our next major newscast comes up at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. I am Jason Shields. Do have a good afternoon.
News from the street. News from the street. 919fm.com. Broadcasting from Trinidad to the world. The Street 919 FM.